everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Chocolate Beauty. If this is your first time visiting my page, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's get into it. So I want to talk about what has taken place after the panel that I did with ScottyBynature TV on Thursday. So it was a group of YouTubers that came together and had a discussion about colorism and the issues within the Black community and also the issues on Basketball Wives. Well, I wanted to make sure that I stay connected to people as far as this conversation goes because it's very important to me. So I've been reading people's comments in the comment section, and there were two things that came up about I said on the panel. So I want to clear those two things up and at the same time give people clarity on what I meant by the things I said. The first thing was about Jamaicans and bleaching. And I want to address that because a lot of people made statements about bleaching and the issues that's currently going on in Jamaica, which I did address in the video somewhat. But I'm going to dive a little bit deeper in explaining why I said what I said, or to just really give you guys clarity on what I meant by my statements. And the second thing that people were saying was they wish they had somebody who had some type of background or knowledge or experience, somebody who knew this conversation of colorism in depth. And I made a comment about anti-racism. I wanted to give you guys some type of evidence or some type of background on what I meant about being an anti-racist and where I got that from and the leading expert that I got the information from. And I'm going to show you a snippet of his work. I want to make sure that people do not dismiss anything that anybody said during the panel, because I know that some people do have some type of knowledge, and I'm one of those people who has taken the time out to just really understand what's going on as far as like American policy and racism within this country. So I think it's very important that even though people may say things and give you their word on certain topics, it is very important that you're able to look up this information yourself and that you'll be able to have something tangible yourself that you can digest yourself. So I'm going to give you that information. Now, when I was talking about my experience as a child and saying that I didn't experience colorism within the Jamaican community, you got to understand that I grew up in the 80s and bleaching was something that was frowned upon. Never have I experienced somebody in my family offer me bleaching cream to lighten up my skin. Never have I experienced anybody in my family discriminating against me, saying that they think I should be lighter. And I'm talking about the adults, okay? We're talking about the first generation of my family that moved to the United States. When I made my statements, when I was talking about my family, we don't talk about each other like that. We don't use derogatory term when we talk to our children. I'm talking about my family and what I experienced. And maybe I should have made that clear in the video that I was talking about my experience, which I thought that I did. But that's how the way that my family operates. They do not discriminate against people who are dark. They've never discriminated against me. So I just wanted to make that clear to you guys, and not taking away anything that anybody says about people in Jamaica bleaching. Now, I did say in the video that bleaching is definitely a problem inside of Jamaica. What I didn't say is that bleaching is non-existent and that colorism is not a real thing in Jamaica, because the very act of bleaching is saying that you hate your dark skin, which is colorism at its true form, that there's something wrong with you because you're darker. And let's be clear, bleaching hasn't become a real big topic or a real big issue until about 2010. And just like how the way that as society evolves, there's certain taboos or certain things that people will view as taboo that is now not taboo anymore. It's culturally accepted. And that's the same thing that is happening in Jamaica. It is happening in Africa. It's happened in the West Indies that people are lighting up their skin. So I never one time wanted to ever take away people's experience of how the way that they were raised. If they were raised in during the time where people were encouraging them to bleach their skin, encouraging them not to love themselves, living in their true authentic self on how the way that God created them in their beautiful skin. I'm not taking that experience away from you. We have to be so careful about the language that we use when it comes to how the way that we describe people within our own community. You cannot put me in a box and say that I'm just like everybody else. I am not like everybody else, and not all Jamaicans are the same. So I want people to get out that mindset that since it is a popular thing within the country, it doesn't necessarily mean that all Jamaicans bleach their skin. Because I don't bleach my skin. I've never bleached my skin. And I keep hearing people are too sensitive. But at the same time, nobody wants to be put in the box. So make sure that you're not doing the same thing that people outside of our race does to us. And that's the issue that we were talking about. That we were trying to address is that you cannot put all people's experience and say that they're lying because the majority of the people are like that. You can't take away what I didn't experience. And at the same time, I'm not taking away anybody's experience. If you're an islander, if you're a Jamaican or somebody that's African, that family just really encouraged them to bleach their skin, that's an issue. That's something that needs to be talked about. Everybody was saying, Jamaicans are colorists, Jamaicans, hate Black Americans, they have their own prejudice. That same thing can be said about Black Americans. It's everywhere. That's the problem. We need to get to a place where we are not discriminating against each other, regardless if you're a Black foreigner or if you're somebody that lives in the United States. We need to start seeing things for what they are, and how the way that we have been poisoned in our minds to believe that a particular group of people don't look good. I'm not saying that there's no issues within the Jamaican community, because there absolutely is a problem within the Jamaican community. But the Jamaican community is no different than what's going on in other Black communities. And that's what we're trying to do. We want people to get to the point where they're understanding that maybe certain practices is colorist, and they maybe need to change their vocabulary on how the way that they say certain things to people. And that was the whole purpose of the panel, saying, hey, there's a colorist issue everywhere. Everywhere. I was speaking on the behalf of my situation and how the way that I was raised. So I want people to understand that just because I didn't experience that other people didn't. That's their story. You can't take away their story. And then the next person can say, well, that's not true because that's not what I experienced. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about it. If that's not what you experienced, then we want to hear from you. We want to hear your story. Your voice matters. You matter. What you went through and what your experience and the things that you have gone through cannot be taken away from you. That's my whole point. And we're not isolating you or trying to diminish what is going on in our current environment. We are not in a good place as a community as a whole, across the board. I wanted to just make that brief statement addressing that no, I was not trying to isolate a group and trying to say that Jamaicans are not this way. And the same can be said about every country that's predominantly Black. There is a self-hatred that goes on. But when I was growing up, it wasn't something that was looked as a good thing. Everybody thought it was taboo. You were actually ostracized if you bleached your skin when I grew up. So it really goes to show you that after time, certain things that has become unacceptable will become acceptable in the next 20 years. Things that's not acceptable now, come back to me in 20 years and we will see that these issues that we thought that would not even be able to be talked about that would never make its way to something that is globally accepted. It would be accepted in the next 20 years. And that's the same thing with bleaching. It wasn't something that was acceptable in the 80s. It just wasn't. Did people bleach their skin? Absolutely. But people were so embarrassed that they had a family member that bleached their skin. They kind of just like separated them from the rest of everybody else. And now it's turned around, and colorism is very bad in Jamaica. It's very bad. But I mean, like, it may be bad there now, but it has never ever altered or made me look upon my own personal childhood and what I experienced. And still to this day, my family encourages me and says, you know, very positive and reaffirming things about my complexion. And I have family that still live in Jamaica that refuse to partake in the bleaching. It is an issue globally, and there's a lot of colorism that's heavy in the islands, that's heavy in Africa. If you want to like make it plain and make it clear, OG is in her 20s, and Africa is a country that promotes bleaching. They have bleaching events, but she loves the skin that she's in. Why? Because her family made sure that she loved herself, made sure that she walked around with her head held high and proud of her African features, proud of her darkness of skin, proud of everything that's pertaining to her heritage. And that's the same thing that I experienced. So me making that comment about talking about my experience as a Jamaican woman, I grew up in a different time. I grew up in a time where bleaching was taboo. Not taking away and saying that it's not a problem now, because it absolutely is. There's a lot of people who don't associate with the narrative that's painted about our community. So that's why it's very important that even though there's these situations going on in Jamaica and in these different countries, that we don't isolate the families who is dead set against it and that tell their children to love themselves. Because there are people that do that. I mean, OG is the very definition of somebody that is a lot younger, in her 20s, that experienced colorism, but she was raised in a family that has a country that has an issue, but that didn't stop her family from teaching her how to love herself. So, moving on. So one of the questions that was brought up during this panel was, how can we go about fixing it? How can we go about trying to make a change when it comes to colorism and racism and featureism that goes on in our own community? How can we fix it? The way that I answered that question was, I said that we need to have open conversation for those who are open. And also I said that we need to practice what it is to be an anti-racist. My response that I actually said during the panel came from a leading expert in anti-racism. So to give you a brief background on this particular person, his name is Dr. Abraham Kendi, is a leading expert in anti-racism. He is a historian. He studies racist policies within the United States government. He is a professor. And Times Magazine named him as one of the most 100 influential peoples in our country. So I want to show you a video that backs up what I was saying, and from the very expert that I pulled this information from. So without further ado, Dr. Kendi.
What's the difference between being not racist and being anti-racist?
Well, historically, whenever people are challenged for saying and doing something that's racist, typically their response is, I'm not racist. No matter what they just said, no matter what they just did. By contrast, someone who is striving to be anti-racist is actually willing to admit the times in which they express racist ideas. They're willing to admit the times in which they sort of support racist policies because they're in a process of changing. They're changing themselves. They're seeking to change society. They're not necessarily in denial like many Americans who claim they're not racist.
I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to come to this panel with just my experience and my outrage and my anger. I wanted to make sure that you guys had something to back that information up. Since it was said a few times in the comments about people finding leading experts, people may say, you know, anti-racism and anti-colorism are two different things, but I think that the approach that he has on anti-racism is the same way that we can deal with anti-colorism. There's a lot of videos that he's done, a lot of speaking engagements that he's done, a lot of panels that he has done talking about this topic and talking about racism and racist policies that's within the United States government. So I think that he's a very interesting person. His name is spelled Kendi. Dr. Kendi. So make sure you check him out. Thank you so much for those of you who came and watched the panel and engaged and really enjoyed it. I would like to take the time out to thank ScottyBynature TV once again for giving me the opportunity to talk to a new audience, to introduce me to other influential YouTubers. I was so excited and nervous and grateful for the opportunity to speak on this panel. And I would like to welcome all my new subscribers. Thank you so much for subscribing to my YouTube channel. Hopefully you will enjoy the conversation, my commentary. I'm not heavy all the time. I actually am a person that loves to laugh. So hopefully you can get into the different commentary. All right, you guys, thank you for watching my latest video addressing this latest panel that I did on ScottyBynature TV. Hopefully, I'll see you soon. Ciao.